Hello, my name is Marlon Adams and I'm here in the studio of Gordon College. This is where we teach painting classes, portrait, landscape, all kinds of things that we painted in this studio. And I'm sitting in front of this portrait I'm working on of Grace Graham. I'm in the middle of this project. But what I'm going to share with you is a portrait of Lauren Mcleod that you'll see from start to finish. I'll show you everything that I do that I can think of course, in the process of painting in that portrait of Lauren, which you are about to see right now. I used to have a big barrel of turpenoid. Actually, I used turpentine way back when it was breathable, when it wasn't too foul smelling, but then I think all of a sudden it got smelly because then they could make all these odorless solvents that cost more. I actually use a couple of kinds of brushes. I want to point out what brushes that I use here. I use, of course, two kinds. The hog bristle, which is this white bristle. It looks like this when it actually when you buy it. That's actually hog bristle. It comes off from the back of hogs. And I use a sable brush, which is a very soft brush to get into details and so forth. And I've got some smaller brushes. About the smallest I use is a number 2. That's about this size. A number 2 flat. Two kinds of brushes here. This is a hog bristle brush, sable, and a number 2 Kolinsky red sable is the smallest I'm using here. If I need anything smaller than that, I do have some small rounds. But to explain the palette that I use, I've got a multitude of colors out here. And I don't do just one type of painting. Obviously, I do landscapes and still lifes and various kinds of paintings. So I have probably more colors than even the normal portrait painter uses. We have ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, viridian. That's a permanent green. And I believe that is a chromium oxide green that I happen to have in my drawer that has, it's a little more subtle green. Alizarin crimson, this is a much more typically a portrait color. Burnt umber, which is very dark. And then I've got transparent oxide red just beside it, which is a very transparent red-brown, which is very good for dark browns in the portrait. It's a wonderful color. Basically, you've got your pigment, and then you've got linseed oil as the vehicle. This is cad red light, and this is a color that's very close to it. It's called cadmium scarlet, which is just a little bit lighter and brighter. And then I've got yellow ochre and 2 shades of cadmium yellow. This is a cad yellow deep. These are flesh colors that I make myself, and obviously there are people who sell colors. Some they're very similar to those. The light side mixtures, these are basically cad red light, yellow ochre, and white. And then as I get a little bit darker, add just a little bit of cerulean blue into those colors to get them to neutralize just a little bit. This is a sort of a neutral color that's actually a mixture of black, yellow ochre, and white. That's actually a great color for some neutrals in the face, some of the colors that go a little bit cool in the face. That's a great color. This is cad red light, yellow ochre, and some cooling colors like viridian and so forth. This dark color is basically burnt sienna, a little bit of viridian, and a touch of yellow cadmium orange in that to make it a little bit more neutral color. Then I've got some variety of reds that I like to add into the mixtures. This is actually, this one over here is, this is a color called Barn Red. This is a color that's a Terra Rosa. This is Venetian Red. This one is, let's see, Caput Mortem, very similar actually. What is it? Mars Violet is what this is actually called, but those two colors are about the same. And this color is Permanent Mauve that I find is really quite a beautiful color, and especially in the shadows when you get a little bit of a cool color in the shadows. If you want to go a little bit to the violet color, that's a good color to use. This one is Naphthol Red, and I believe that one is actually a Phthalo Red Rose. So I put out a variety of colors, some warm reds and some cool reds, and probably the ones that I will use the most are Cad Red Light, Alizarin Crimson, Yellow Ochre, and the flesh tones. And so what I'm going to do to begin with is to block in the model here to show you exactly how I will get started on this thing. And I use yellow ochre as a color to block in. Lots of artists use a variety of colors. When I was in college, the teacher said, use burnt umber. And I asked him why, and he said, no reason, just that's a good color to use. But I actually prefer to use yellow ochre because it's probably the most common color that I use in the process of painting the portrait. And it's a fairly neutral color. It covers easily, and so I think it's probably better to use that as a fairly neutral color to block in with and then paint over. I never draw on the canvas with charcoal. I know lots of artists do, but I don't like the fact that it mixes in with your colors a little bit. Your yellow ochre certainly does too, but you're going to have to give a little somewhere, but I happen to like the fact that yellow ochre seems to work for me. I should explain the surface that I'm working on. This is a fairly heavy texture, a regular texture, cotton duck canvas. And I believe the maker is Utrecht, and it's very well braced on the back. This is a very nice surface to use. It's a tight weave, so that turns out to be a nice canvas to use. It's a very common surface to use. Our model is Lauren Mcleod, and she has graciously volunteered to pose for me, or she, the word I suppose is, she agreed to pose for me. But here we go with the block in. When I block in, obviously we just figure out where the placement is going to be on the canvas. So I'm going to put in some fairly large lines just to figure out how she's going to be placed on the canvas first. A block in, as I said, is an attempt to gain control of the composition, so all it is a method of placing the figure on the canvas. So in this case, this is a 24 by 30 canvas, and I'm going to figure out about how we're going to fill this space. I know a lot of academic artists who do a lot of preliminary drawing, even going into a great deal of charcoal detail with charcoal and drawing things very carefully. But I have felt that that was somewhat of a waste of time over my career, so that if you can set up what it is you're going to paint in good fashion so that it looks good and you know that it's going to turn out looking good, then I think you're ready to paint. I don't like to waste a lot of time in preparation, and I know John Sargent certainly did do that kind of thing. So now I've estimated approximately what the size of the head is going to be. The shoulder will be down considerably here. So basic placement. Now I'm going to get into some detail on the head to get a reasonable look at what it's going to look like. Now, that's going to be approximately, it's maybe a little bit smaller than life. So when I start out, I get the size and shape of the head going from the outside to the inside, and then working out the position of the features. And as I'm going to position the eyes halfway, of course, between the bottom of the chin and the top of the head. The nose a little above halfway, I'm simply going to indicate that with a V shape for the end of the nose, and then an auxiliary V shape here for the flare of the nostril. As I come up the barrel of the nose here, I'm going to draw the socket itself before I get into the detail of the eye. And I want to position the eye. Now you'll see me placing dots at a position where I think I'm going to draw the line. So I'm actually estimating where I'm going to go with the line before I put it down sometimes. The size of the eye. And then I can come in and shape it somewhat. And when I come in to indicate the pupil, just a couple of straight lines. I don't want to go into any detail, rounding out anything necessarily. A block in, I do almost as if I'm cutting something out of a block of wood. With a sword or a knife, you just use primarily straight lines to indicate positions and angles and those kinds of things. The mouth. Now I'm actually, as I get into this, I'm actually going to be changing some lines. I want to start with the philtrum, that groove that comes from the septum of the nose down to the top of the lip. I want to draw that that line in. Now obviously I'm going to bring down the chin a little bit to accommodate what I've done here. And as I look at my model, I see that, of course, the widest part of her face is right at the cheekbone. So I'll pull in that left side of the face. And the neckline, as I see it underneath the hair, we've got some strands of hair coming straight down and outward like this. Left-hand side. And I want to position the neck, which appears long simply because the hair falls down and then turns right as it hits the top of the chest there. I'm trying to figure out at this point where I'm going with the necklace, of the positioning, so you'll notice that I sort of look at where it's going to end up before I put the line down. And some indication of where the earrings are going to go. And I obviously, when you draw anything, you position it in relation to everything else that you've got on there already. So. And the hair will come down here. When I draw, for instance, the shoulder line, I look at where the line is going or where it would go as it crosses the face, so I know where it's going to connect. Now, drawing is obviously something that the skills you acquire over a long period of time. But one of the very best things that I have found that helps my students to learn to draw quickly is to use a grid and to copy drawings. That is really one of the best devices for learning to see quickly. Now, lots of artists use various methods for measuring and so forth. I used to use to hold my brush up a lot to get the position of various things in the picture plane, but over the years you do a lot of measuring simply with your eyes and don't have to use that nearly as much, though I still do it occasionally. And the position of that blue cloth coming down behind the head, and a few of the lines that will be coming down. And certainly I love that color, which is a really nice complement to this color that we've got on the model, this peachy or salmon color that she happens to be wearing, which is really nice. I'm going to draw some of the shadow lines on her, and then I'll begin to fill in some of the lights and darks on the model. And we have a shadow line coming down, in this case on the left-hand side of the face, and the shape of the shadow on the nose will give us a great deal of information here. And as I look carefully, I see that that right nostril comes right below the tear duct on the right-hand side. And certainly I want to make sure that I've got the tear ducts lined up one across from the other. I don't want to have the model having one eye higher than the other. You've got to be careful about those kinds of things, obviously. The models don't like it. Now, I have to tell you that I think that probably the best lighting condition for portrait painting is a north light with a high north light, because it has a full range of color across the model. What I'm going to do is fill in a couple of values on flesh tones to begin with. Actually, maybe 3 values. I'm going to, and you sort of obliterate what you've drawn there, so actually, let's start with the light side. And just fill in a low value of the light side, and this is of course with my light 3, my lowest light value here. And generally speaking, I just lay in a couple of values to begin a painting, and then I'll come back and model the form and adjust color, really mostly at the end. I know a lot of artists who lay in some brilliant, not a lot of artists, maybe Nelson Shanks lays in a lot of brilliant color and then comes back and adjusts the color and neutralizes it as he paints. I come in with a couple of colors and then probably make the color more brilliant as I go along. Now, what I'm going to do is to throw some warmer colors across the cheeks and the nose, because there is a band of warm color that crosses the face right at that position. And in her case, I thought a little bit about using some cad red light. I think I'm going to use a combination of cad red light, a touch of cad red light, and a touch of alizarin crimson. To go a little bit warmer on the face, right across the cheeks and the nose, which is that the band of warm color. Now, the more neutral colors, of course, portrait painting is mostly a whole lot of very neutralized colors. And one of the most important things to know about painting is how to neutralize a color. And the best way, in my opinion, of course, is to cross the color wheel and pick an opposite color on the color wheel to neutralize a color as you paint. There's actually only 4 ways to neutralize a color. You can add black or white and you get a shade or a tint. And then the third way is to tone a color, which is to use a gray of the same value. And that will certainly neutralize the color. Now, as I look at the shadow side of her face, I'm going to use this combination of burnt sienna and viridian, and a little bit of cad orange, and just put in a pattern of light pattern of the shadow that I see. And as I paint, I certainly pull a lot of colors together, and there's no way in the world that I can identify for you every time I put my brush down what colors I'm using, because what I do is adjust in progress, and every artist does the same thing. So to try and evaluate every color that I'm putting on here and mixing together would be fruitless. It really would. So notice that I am trying to model the values around the eyes before I put in any of the details, so that I sort of build the form before I get to putting in any of those smaller details. And as I look at the color for the mouth, I'm going to use this Terra Rosa color. Throw in a little bit of a alizarin crimson and some Venetian red. And I'm looking at the eyes, and I'm going to use some transparent oxide red to put in that iris. If you'll look right at me, appreciate it. Now, as we get to putting in some deeper values, we'll see the modeling come together, I believe, a little bit. You should have your canvas right about eye level so that you're not having to strain it all, neither leaning forward or something like that in order to see what you're doing. Let's see. I'm going to go to a smaller brush and get a few points of articulation or